Chris had some good ideas. He wasn't in the last meeting, so this was his opportunity to provide them. So we'll incorporate those, and it will be the final version of the Visio. And the other thing I think is that we can start thinking ahead a little bit and think about what kinds of things we can focus on in the coming year.
Yeah, yesterday we had that discussion with one of the other teams that Cello led, and I thought it was very informative. It was with a CIP team. You know, Deb, you were part of that, and
okay, good.
You know, it was a good discussion. You know,
yeah.
And Mert, I'm going to have to skip out after 30 minutes because I got to go to the dentist. But you know,
right.
Go for it.
All right, no, that's yeah.
Scott told me that he preferred to go to the dentist than to sit through one of these meetings.
A root canal or a wise team.
Yeah.
So, you know, he'll probably go like, you know what? I could skip the gas today. I'm already feeling after this meeting pretty sleepy. All right. Hey, Chris, you're here. Good.
Hello, everyone.
All right, let's go ahead and start.
We have a new guest. Maria, did you want to introduce yourself, or?
Oh, do we have a new attendee? Yes.
Oh, hi. So one person in my team forwarded this meeting. I am part of the Shared and Support Services team at Metro Vancouver, and we are in charge of asset management. So that's why I'm here. I'm just trying to understand what you're doing.
Very much welcome. You're very much welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I haven't met Maria yet, so which is funny. But yeah, welcome to the organization. Are you new to Metro or?
Yes, this is my second month.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So welcome to Metro and welcome to WISE.
Thank you.
And Maria, I understand Metro Vancouver has a few different sort of business arms on like water, wastewater. Maybe there is like other stuff there. Which group are you with again?
Water services.
Water. So that's potable water, or is it wastewater?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Drinking water we use.
Drinking water. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. And hi, Jenny. So Mert, fire away, and then if there's a little bit of time at the end, you know, we can go through some questions. But you just take.
Yeah,
you and Chris take all the time. Take all the time you.
Yeah, I hope we are going to be pretty fast here. And Chris, for the record, I know you sent me some nice comments this morning between meetings. I haven't had a chance to incorporate them yet, so you can maybe chime in on the key ones.
Yep.
As I talk about the Visio. Okay, good. So just give me a second here. All right, so I'm in a, like, I don't know, this kind of not my usual space. I'm using the laptop with just the one screen in this little conference room. So I have to be a little more. All right, here we go. Slow here. Let's see. I think this was it. Okay. I hope you see the Visio.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So remember everybody that we actually had our original Visio to develop that showed the steps of putting together an asset management plan. So what we did was that we focused on develop the management strategies and then develop the cost of those management strategies processes, and added, if you will, this whole, I'm going to zoom out just to show you, this whole thing here that covers the life cycle cost, determining life cycle cost components of whatever the management strategies we are coming up with. And here we cover operations and operations related costs, as well as like predictive, corrective, and preventive maintenance related costs, not specific preventive maintenance activities such as oil change, or not specific predictive maintenance activities such as vibration monitoring on assets, but if any assets are applicable, they would basically be, we would take these steps to sort of collect and analyze and project the life cycle costs associated with those activities.
Mert,
Yes,
you might
Scott.
want to blow it up a little bit. It's hard to see.
Oh no,
If
of
you-
course. I just stepped out for a second just to show everybody.
Good.
Like the
good.
outline.
All right.
Yeah, we're gonna zoom in.
See,
as we-
Scott's already asleep. Yeah, he was just
He's
showing
like,
us how big this chart
I
is.
wish I were at the dentist already.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, as we zoom in now, this is no different than, the boxes are not different than what you saw last time around, with a few exceptions. So I'll cover those. Oops. Oh, okay. It's a little, the mouse. I don't have my mouse here, so it's a little sensitive. Okay. So a couple of things here. One is, want to the little clarification that this little box at the very beginning is actually not part of coming up with the asset management strategies and then later on coming up with those costs, but it is actually this essential step in lifecycle costing where, we rely on asset replacement values as a pseudo, as a kind of like a input into figuring out the other lifecycle components when we actually don't have them historically collected. There's a little bit of an explanation towards that there. Everything else here is the same, except, added some clarification here on, develop decay curve. But yeah, I mean, only if condition or failure rate, like over time can be plotted. And yeah, some brief explanations as, these, what do you call it, amendments, I guess. Yeah, so yeah, there is a little, and I remember, Chris, you commented on this. So asset rehabilitation possible? If it's not possible, then we don't, I mean, initially it was set up so that we don't even need to worry about looking at whether or not it's feasible or not. But if it's possible, then, we go through this step of saying, well, is it even worth it? Even though it may be possible, is it even worth it for a specific asset? If it's worth it in terms of, the life extension you get for the money you put in for rehabilitation compared to like replacement cost, brief feasibility analysis there, we go ahead and assign that cost. If not, we basically just skip it basically. That's why it was set up that way. I'm happy to, merge these if it makes it clearer. Next item is that I believe this was Noemi actually that noted that, hey, why don't we talk about like the different criteria we use for deciding whether or not, certain management strategies will be applicable to certain assets, such as, is it worth doing, oil testing on this transformer, or is it worth doing vibration analysis on this pump, or whatever, like, is it worth, doing preventive maintenance on this, or is it just going to be run to failure? So, we just added some notes here, like, for us to decide all that, asset consequence of failure, the asset risk perhaps, and any results we may get out of the MECA analysis type work, whether or not there are hidden failures, the asset criticality, priority, whatever, safety concerns that go into this. It's kind of like there is a lot here, obviously. I mean, here we're just basically listing out three, three things that may be considered for such decision making. But, there is like, I mean, we can even, I mean, I can off the top of my head, I can say, like asset failure cost. And you may be looking at it as part of COF anyway, but just by itself, or asset replacement cost, value, asset remaining useful life. I mean, we can come up with, like for your organization too, you can come up with like a bunch of criteria where you say, well, this only has 2 years left. I'm not going to worry about maintaining it anymore. I got the spare ready to go in the storeroom, or, it's expiring soon. Then, there's, or it's obsolete now. So, we can't even find the parts for it. So why do preventive maintenance on it anymore? We just get the new one installed, like whatever it is, like we have like these criteria there.
Can I chime in there?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I mean, yeah, that's related to my one of my comments on other comments about, how do we, so I know we're gonna get into the next section of this flow chart, which is whether PM, CM, and PDM recommended. But to me and to Metro Vancouver, it's really associated with the how critical that asset is, which is a COF in our asset management policy. And as you mentioned, COF has a lot of sort of components, whether it's a cost or other risk
Safety.
elements, right? So I think it's important to recognize that so that it is nicely linked to the risk analysis or assessment topic as well.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Safety considerations. There. Good point, Chris. So this is a link to risk, absolutely, and not even just, sometimes not even just like a specific asset failure risk, but even non-asset, like an operational risk, such as, like inability to secure, proper amount of like good reliable power, or inability to secure, chemicals needed for supporting the treatment operations. Like the assets may be fine, but for different, those could also be, considerations there. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, yep, no, absolutely agree 100%.
Can I take you off for just a second to?
Please, yeah.
And what you just said made me think of yesterday in our they had a one of our plants were doing this is where we're at in our budget year so far, and it was interesting when they talked about that there was a high cost of using natural gas. We're moving into natural gas, and of course the costs have gone up on anything, any type of gas. And now I've lost what I was actually trying to say, but I thought it was an interesting, which goes along with what you're talking about in terms of replacements and things like that. The cost of energy, they tell us that the cost, they, meaning our engineers, say, well, we're going to replace what you've got with this because your energy costs are going to go down. And yet right now we're seeing that it's way more expensive. So it's like, okay, well, where did you come up with your numbers? So these kinds of things are interesting, and it's just an example of how we may not cost correctly when we're doing things. Engineering for maintenance and operations, we're maybe not doing really that.
Yeah, it's energy cost, especially like for us last year. I don't know if this was the case in other parts of the country, but for us in the Pacific Northwest, actually, so we had a little bit of a chlorine availability issue. So it didn't become a problem, but definitely put us out of our like comfort zone, and the costs went up as a result of the supply and demand balance there. So it really kind of threw our budget, actually. So we had to, move funds around to cover that. So I think going forward, we are basically exercising a little bit more of a, more liberal sensitivity analysis in some of these costs. I think energy is kind of becoming like that, just like the global supply chain and the geopolitics started to play a role. And it's, like something happening in Europe ends up affecting Pacific Northwest now too. So, so I think the point is that I think we need to ask those hard questions to engineers. Hey, when you did your sensitivity analysis for your, like this, it's going to cost this much dollar per therm or whatever for natural gas. Yeah, I think we need to really do a wider, perhaps, sensitivity analysis than we did before on the costs. I think that's what it boils down to. I mean, it's not a great pun, but it's natural gas boiling.
Yeah. It kind of lends itself to getting away from just estimates like we've used in the past to really taking a look at what's really going on. So I appreciate that. It's our energy group really can help us with those if we involve them. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wonder if the CIP team, can somebody remind me, Scott Cello, does the CIP team, do they not have like a business case sub-process?
Yeah,
somewhere
business
in there?
case evaluation. That's
Yeah,
right. A BCE
Yeah.
type of process. DC Water in particular went a long ways in developing that, and there's others that are doing it as well. Tacoma, you know, does that also. Jenny's on the phone, so a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah, so to me, you know, this is really an input into that discussion in terms of like how robust the like the scenario modeling, or like and I call it sensitivity analysis, but like scenario modeling for different alternatives is how robust it is.
Right.
And I think it's something that can be incorporated into that, and it maybe is already. I just, if it's not, like it should be.
Yeah, there can be groans about that too, Casey, but but actually there are, on business case evaluations, there are, more complex ways to do it and simpler ways to do it as well. There's a light version that I think Tacoma was using. Baltimore used one that's been pretty effective also. So it's coming more and more into practice.
Oh, my groan was purely on the natural gas pun.
Oh, okay. Okay. I wasn't sure. I saw the groan, but yeah.
And I cannot see anybody raising their hands. I cannot see anybody's camera. So just holler at me, please, if you have something to say. Just barge in. No, hard feelings here on that. So yeah, next was, once we know, we have our criteria, and then we make the decision on, yes, we are going to do PM, we're going to do CM, we're going to do PDM, or whatever it is. We basically just remember we step through these, and these did not change. So no change here from last time around. So we'll, it basically is, yes, so PM recommended. If yes, then, just look at what we have tracked historically, if it's available. Then then develop a, and then pick, we had our curves, if you remember, or everybody will come up with their own curves, obviously, for their organizations, but we had some example ones in our Excel file. So we just pick a curve and then pick a shape factor, and then that's basically our projection into the future, how the preventive maintenance cost will change over time. And the same thing just rinse and repeats for corrective maintenance activities and for predictive maintenance activities for different assets. And we generally like to do this on a per asset class. So that, we don't have to necessarily do it for every asset. Then it can be a little difficult to just manage. So that was the maintenance side. On the operations side, we had a few changes here in terms of explanations.
Hey, Mert, could I quickly interrupt?
Yeah.
I had a question. It kind of relates to what Deb was saying in a way. Is there a place or an appropriate way to kind of deal with like standard specs or something like that? In other words, a criteria, you may want to get all the same kind of pumps or motors or whatever, and not just take low bids and that kind of thing. So in your criteria and your selection, of an assignment to lifecycle costs and all of that, is that in the scope of this, or is that outside?
No, that's outside, Scott. Yeah. So that's really is, it can be so case specific. For us, anything, we may not even care anything under 25 horsepower for pumps, but like it may be a big deal for some other utility. And even like, operating context even comes into play, right? So like, like the same pump, like 25 horsepower pump, we wouldn't normally care about, let's say, going into details. It may be like a super important asset because of its function somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we would want to be a little more careful on that one. So we generally use the asset class as kind of an initial filter, and then we still wouldn't want to overlook like the, the case by case variations there. and associated with location, operating context, operating environment, we still would like to account for this. So there's like a lot of variation to capture there, I think. So I guess short answer is no, it's not included here. And your long answer is because of all those reasons I said.
Sure.
Thank you. Oh, and lastly, and just again, Scott, no problem. Just everybody else, just barge in if you have questions. And this last part that you're seeing on the screen is the operations side of our discussion. So added a few things here to explain it better. So first question when we are talking about operations cost is that what are they? We generally have to deal with power. What is it? Labor, chemicals. I think those are like the big ones for most of us. So we start on the power side, whether or not it's, the asset we're interested in, are we actually tracking that, like submetering it? And that's a potential link for energy management team there, because I'm thinking they are coming up with certain criteria to submeter things, either on a, at a meter or measure them, by, it's like some other way. But that's, I think a link there we talked about. Here we had a question around power usage significance and significance, like that will be there. Everybody will need to come up with a cutoff for, their operations decisions there, but it can be a matter of, like kilowatt hours basically there per year, or month, and then, and then we do an estimate annual power usage with those inputs. And then we basically, like that covers the power cost. And then we are basically a little weak here in terms of like non-power related costs. But if we want to assign, if there is like dedicated, non-power operations cost for certain assets, we can add them here.
Hey, Mert, you can't see the screen or the hands, and Cello has had his hand up for a little while.
Oh, great. Yeah, Cello, go ahead.
Yeah, Deb as well. I'll yield to Deb and then I'll ask.
Okay. Deb?
So my quick question then in this leads me to process. And, because we have a group that monitors processes, and I'm sure that you do too, and whether the process is causing something's going on, some type of upset or whatever, is that just boiled down to chemicals and power?
Oh, like in a process upset in a wastewater facility, for example, Deb?
So when you're talking about annual usage measured, review power usage, et cetera, it leads me to thinking about how we monitor. We have, PCG has equipment attached to certain processes that say how things are running and whether or not we have process upsets or not. Does that just boil down to these things here of what's your annual power usage and failure rates and things like that?
So I would say for things that require this, to me, I mean, I can only think of like one example related to power usage. So there are certain assets where like power used, let's say, like, oh, it's drawing like so many amperes versus, like in the case of a pump versus like what it is able to pump out. That relationship is generally a sign of, some sort of an operational problem. It could be like, cavitation or clogging, or it could be that, perhaps impeller is wearing out. So there could be some specific operational instances that could be, I think, but there needs to be some like investigation afterwards. It's just sign that there's a problem. But I believe there needs to be some investigations afterwards to make that work, determination. Regarding process upsets, I think probably other kind of like SCADA data points beyond power would be more beneficial for some of those items. And I don't necessarily know if it would actually translate itself in like operations component of lifecycle cost. I'm just brainstorming right now, top of my head, but I think you may actually see increasing trend on corrective maintenance activities over time, perhaps, if that's what's happening. Yeah, or if let's say you're mixing a chemical in, and then the concentration measured after mixing is just it's just not what it used to be at a specific point. So perhaps the reaction isn't robust enough because you're not able to mix as vigorously because there's a problem with the asset. But in that case, though, that cost, like, it's not going to be tracked against that specific asset, the chemical cost that is. It's not going to be assigned to the mixer. So I think that would be difficult to say, oh yeah, that's why the cost for this item has increased because we are now spending more chemicals. So we're just testing out some scenarios to test, to test this out. I test this idea out, but it's to me, it seems a little difficult now. Maybe I'm missing something. Others can chime in. Okay.
Now, Cello?
Yeah, well, one of the things that would be useful, I think, even though you may the stuff that you would add may be specific to either Portland or Vancouver or whatever, but it would be a start. It'd be really nice if you could, in a BPMN, attach data objects that identify the systems that provide this kind of, where you would expect that this information would be coming from. So for example, if you have a block, that says, review power usage data, if it's measured, maybe attach, like, does it come from a SCADA system? Does it come, where does it come from? I think that would start really kind of adding good content for or if it's wherever it's coming from, that I think would be very helpful.
Like this, for example, CMMS contains the data needed to calculate this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then later, if you'd like, you can always attach an object to the line that you connected. So later on, as we add, this line, you can say what's carried on that line. And if you have an artifact that shows that laying around, that says a list of things that are provided or something like that, even that I think will help people truly understand how all the nuts and bolts are working, and be good additional information.
Hey, Mark, you should use an association for that arrow rather than the sequence flow.
Oh, thank you.
Just a small point.
I think Cello made a great point about linking the system, the data source. For example, for Metro, we do use the databases from the power utilities to assess the annual power consumptions, and also our financial management systems, which is Unit 4 in our case. We also draw like the chemicals and other materials costs from that as well.
Yeah, then it starts. It kind of connects the dots.
So
Thanks.
does anybody know the difference between a data object and data store? Let's see. It says here, data objects provide information.
So that's the
data.
document that Cello was talking about, and the data store is a system.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we have a submeter that stores the data either on it or it sends it to the SCADA system. So what should we call it? So submetering. I'm just going to call it submetering data wherever it's stored, just as an example. Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, we can add a few of these here. Okay, maybe something like this.
Yeah, just, that would help. So this thing that looks like a cylinder or whatever that you're moving, that's really where the stuff is. And when you associate with that line, then you say what's actually being provided. You know what I mean? That's the difference.
Yeah, I mean, so it's the power usage data,
Yeah, you could, and later when somebody works with this, they can post, it can gradually improve and give a little bit more full picture of what's going on, where the stuff, and then it also will connect us with when we start thinking about technologies that are used to enable this process.
Okay, sounds good. Let me save this real quick. There we go. All right. Excellent, thank you. And there may be a few of these, so we could take a quick peek at that while I go over the comments Chris sent me earlier today, and we can add a few of these there too. Okay, thank you, everyone. And then that last item was, like I was saying, trying to, under the operations cost side, trying to capture sort of like anything that is not power that can be associated with an asset. And then, it could be, it's up to, I mean, that detail really is up to us then here. So, if we are tracking, regular or overtime against a specific asset, or if there's like this pool of hours which we can distribute across the assets for the operations side, not the maintenance side, but the operations side, we could do that. Generally, I tend to think it's overkill, so I don't do that, but there may be like instances where we bring in like third-party operators to operate certain assets. And, like I've seen like the dewatering operations perhaps being, like just given to a vendor for a specific cost. And the watering equipment is operated with that input. So that could be good to track, because later on we would like to know, okay, what is it costing us to operate these assets, with the help of a third party. If not, maybe we should do it ourselves if the costs are not feasible. Anyway, yeah,
Hey,
so
Mark,
these are the, yeah.
real quick, sorry.
No
We
problem.
have what you call centralized maintenance. So that could be considered, like outside of operations, because what they do is they have their budget, and their budget says that for instance, one of the plants, Blue Lake, that they estimate that they're gonna use 100,000 or $1 million over at that plant this coming year, and then it shows up against that plant as it gets used. Is that what you would consider adding there, because it's not in operations, but it gets taken away from their budget when it's used?
Yeah, so two things I can say is two main things there. One of them is if it is if they have like an operations component, like walkthroughs or checks or like actually operating equipment, then yes. If it is actually tracked, if it's tracked at the facility but not necessarily tracked for individual work orders, Deb, I will say then yes as well, but for a maintenance cost component. However, if they are going into the level of detail where, I mean, I'm sure they are recording it, it's just that, like in their documentation, but if they are not necessarily associating their maintenance hours with specific assets they are working on, and I don't know if that is the case, but if they are not, then that will be kind of like a blanket maintenance cost against the facility, because there's no other way to track it. However, if they are tracking it on a per asset basis, because the rule is one work order, one asset, unless it's a work order such as, oh, we're going to go and inspect 300 valves under this one work order over the course of the month. So like unless it's something like that, one work order, one asset, and then individually costs can be tracked. Okay, this is the PM, this is the PDM, this is the CM work order, and then the cost can be tracked on a per asset basis. Then I would say we can track on a per asset, basically, just like this at the top. But if that level of internal tracking doesn't exist in the systems, then yeah, you'd have to do what you just said, I think.
Mert, just another thought. So when you say like, other data, do you mean something like the number of starts and stops, which on some, gear, it's as important as the runtime, vibration, oil temperature, maybe some inspections information, and from when they go out and inspect. Would that be like other things somewhere here?
So the things that you just mentioned, Cello, I mean, most of them are, predictive maintenance costs. So I would track them under that line item.
Oh,
You said one thing though that wasn't. So I've actually forgot already about the first item you mentioned, SCADA. So I mean, monitoring SCADA data. I mean, that's kind of the operations. What is it like? Like it's a kind of an operator's job. So,
right,
yeah.
but SCADA, SCADA data, SCADA data has, what information on the real time, what the piece of equipment has been doing, the number of time it started, stopped, and there may be some other on bigger pieces of equipment, there may be vibration or oil temperature or whatever else, kind of thing, and it's probably not on the energy branch, but somewhere in there. The reason that I'm suggesting is that it would also, maybe be interesting to see what kind of stuff people are using out there. Just a thought.
Yeah, so this is like I mean, that is almost like that's like an operations and maintenance. Yeah, I mean, that is like a management strategy for the asset. This is important enough for us that we are going to be tracking X, Y, Z on it, and we are going to be linking it to our SCADA data. So the costs associated with setting up those systems, like we would track those as a work order, Cello. Like if somebody wants to know the current, like current and historic, like vibration data collected on an asset, and through SCADA. Yeah, the work order associated with their installation, linking to SCADA. I mean, that is all like a predictive maintenance work order, so maintenance cost. But once it's there in SCADA and it's monitored, then of course it becomes like an operations exercise. And you would expect the reliability engineer from time to time to make sense of that information. Like the field conditions versus, what the asset is doing. So, yeah, so I feel like that's a little like less on the life cycle cost calculations and more on like, like an operations and maintenance sort of management strategy, almost optimization,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, good question. I don't know where it would be. I don't think it's life cycle. I think it's basically like almost like another, like another sub process under like which management strategy, like under the AMP, which management strategy is, applicable.
Sure, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a tendency to overcomplicate things. So.
Oh yeah, me too. So you're in good company, or I'm in good company. Anyway, yeah, so this is it. Now there's a few changes here already, right? So we are gonna add some like data objects or data stores. We are gonna take a look at Chris. Thanks again, by the way, for sending some comments. So I'm gonna incorporate some of those comments as well to this. But in a nutshell, I think this is kind of like, this brings this deliverable at least to a stage where we can add to our, what is it, like end of August or end of September? I don't even know, but like deliverable to WEF per their fiscal year. For this phase, we are going to include our scope of work document, our approach document for calculating lifecycle costs. We're going to add our lifecycle demo, lifecycle cost tool demo, and then we're going to add any of the slides we generated to make our discussion. So we'll add those, and that's gonna, I think, bring this little thing to a conclusion. How do I do? Where is my? I couldn't figure that out earlier because it was asking me. It was asking me to designate a page reference, but you can add like a. There is like a way to add out of page input into this, I think. Maybe there's another way to do it with an actual BPMS software, Dr. Mike. When we are talking about risk as an input, so where was it? Here. Like it would be nice to be able to like, like we'll add CMMS here, whatever, but like, the risk process goes into this, for example. So I don't know how to show that.
Yeah, there's a, put a start event up over there, just drop it on the page somewhere. And then click on that. And what is it? Does it have a right click?
Oh, let me check. Yeah, right click.
And then what's its event type? Does it have a link event?
I don't see.
Does not. But that's
Anyway,
what it is. It's an event.
Okay,
So you could just
like
put
that.
up there a risk event,
Okay.
something.
We'll call it maybe the risk framework. I don't know. Maybe there's a better name for it. I'm getting. All right. So is this a sequence, message, or association?
Yes, a sequence.
Sequence.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's attach it there for now. Okay. Oh, okay. This has to be straight. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so, there are a few ways to improve upon it, I think. It's just that I think it gets us there a little bit more. All right. Well, this was it, really, for the most part. I don't see if there are any other hands there.
Hey, Mert, I got a general comment.
Yes,
if you like blow up your model or decrease the scale so you can see the whole thing. One thing I think you did really well in this model is that every business process is a sequence of decisions, but we often just put tasks up there and don't really show the exact decisions. But one thing you've done really well is to make those decisions explicit. There's a lot of diamonds in your model. And I think that's really beneficial because it shows, the logic that you're working through in your head as you make these decisions. So if anybody else is contemplating modeling, it's really nice when you see this level of detail. It helps to expose those things that are critical. And if you do like Cello was suggesting, where you add in the data objects and the data sources and targets, then you've got a really nice description about the decisions you make and the data that you need to make them. And I think that's really a nice contribution. It's a good job.
Oh yeah, thank you. And yeah, I mean, with the core team's input was very helpful with this, between like Chris, Scott, and Cello. One thing that I was just wondering as I go over this, like, how, before any of these tools existed, how did, people do this? Like, just that would take like a lot of space on paper and boards, and I would run out of things. So it's just, I was just thinking to myself.
Some of these things maybe this is something to think about. Sometimes when you make decisions, you really go out, it's really a cost issue. You go out and collect data and then you make a decision. And then you might route multiple different ways based on the decision that you have, or the complexity of the decision. In a lot of cases, these diamonds have just a couple of outputs. But you could imagine that you might be able to collapse parts of this into one task where you're collecting a lot of data, and then one gateway where you have like 5 outputs or something like that. And you do that because you know that it's easy for me to just go collect the data and get it, make the decision, and then route the workflow accordingly. But that's really a process expert's decision. That's your decision. So you figure out what makes most sense in terms of a process flow, and that's a great way to represent it.
Thank you for the feedback. And just, I think everybody, for the most part, before I forget, familiar with what these are, but just in case you weren't, these are some of the abbreviations we used here. So we have about 15 minutes left on the clock. I think maybe, unless I don't see any other hands, like, somebody tell me if there are any hands, but maybe this is a good opportunity to discuss some potential next steps, meaning not necessarily to wrap this phase up, but, everybody here has kind of like their own sort of preferences and their own like operating reality. And they brought up some important points, like operational wise, that may be worth investigating potentially in the next phase as well. I think we were going to carve out about maybe 10, 15 minutes to talk about like next steps in terms of the next phase. So maybe this is a good time to do that. And I think Scott may have left Cello, but I was in one of the all hands meetings, and I believe there was, I'm going to stop sharing, by the way, so I can see everybody. Okay, here we go. Oh yeah, this is better. So
Okay.
one thing I remember from that all hands meeting was that there were already some potential topics being sort of like put into the discussion pool for next phases. I don't recall them. Sorry, I personally didn't prepare for this part of the discussion that much, but sort of open to everybody. I have my personal preferences on topics I like to investigate deeper, of course, but I don't want to necessarily anchor the discussion to one of those. So
I can jump in perhaps and to kick started. Mert is right. We're going by WEF fiscal years. So they start on September 1. So year 1 is concluding this month. And we started discussions with different groups, initiatives like CIP yesterday and today with asset management about the types of things that we would like to do in the next year. And one of the things that we've been preparing for and gearing up for is these pilots, which means that it's very nice and enjoyable to share experience, and we haven't been sharing artifacts quite as much as I had hoped, but maybe that'll kick in a little bit as we go forward. But basically, to take the artifacts that people have defined that they would like to do, not artifacts, I'm sorry, the pilot studies, which means that they would select a process or a sub-process and then apply the different steps of methodology to that process. And I believe that they're going assessments and everything. I believe that they're going through it with MCES. Deb, is that correct? You kind of going through these kinds of things with the pilot?
I think one of them is the CIP piece, yes. And then we're kind of doing pieces of governance for our enterprise asset management selection.
Oh, actually, that is a topic that is of great interest to several utilities. So that's an example of something that we might want to look into as we go forward. So two things, okay, not two, three things that we would keep in mind. One is this is just a kind of a overall map for the improvement. I've shared it a few times. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time for it. If anybody has questions, would like to have more detail, since we don't have much time left in the meeting today, please reach out to me. Let me know. We'll sit down and talk about all these steps. Assessments are in like purple and light blue and yellow and this kind of beige. We have those tools, and then there are things that we've done like documentation and modeling, analysis of as is, designed to be. So to kind of take a sub-process rolling through these steps and to have some tangible results for improvement that could be implemented in the organization. Here are some, you can see that they are colored differently for the assessments, and these are different utilities and the business processes that they have identified so far. Some of the folks have not quite yet. Maybe I forgot to or failed to put them in, but the idea would be to, when we look at one, although we start with a process, that we also look at the people and at the change management and the technology and so forth. So I'll open it up for discussion now. And this is really yesterday in a meeting of the CIP meeting, people had some really good ideas. And we would try to, so far we've collaborated within teams, within initiative like asset management, but we want to go and bring, let's say, people, we already started to bring in like the Mert and Chris to talk to the energy management people. And then the technology needs to be really plugged into these other efforts so that we can start also cross connecting between different initiatives to have that level of collaboration as well, and to start generating some, good success stories in utility. So I'll stop and see if people have some ideas, thoughts, or, rotten tomatoes or whatever handy.
So I'm just going to say real quickly, you hit on something I think that really should be a major focus area, because you have we do have a lot. I can see the list of initiatives, whether they're top level or whether they're sub processes, which is really great. But I do think that you hit on one really essential element, and that is the collaboration across each of them, the technology teams, et cetera, because this is the way we're going to get better, and this is the way we're going to get things connected. And we sort of talked about those topics just in what Mert showed today. Is you've got the energy piece, you've got the process pieces, you've got all of these different pieces, and across that then too we have the people aspect, which we need to assess. So all of the different assessments that can help us identify and connect.
Yeah, that's great. So what I would suggest is we did get some nice input from the CIP meetings. I'm trying to wake up the competitive spirit in this team. And also, one of the things that would be helpful is to look at integration of IT systems or OT systems that support these processes, which has very often been an issue. Because today we've talked about the SCADA, and then we've talked about CMMS, then maybe, there's GIS, there's the project management system, there's the system finance and all that, to start interconnecting these things to provide better support for these sub-processes and sub-processes. And this of CMMS selection, that's, I apologize that I can't remember which, but at least 2 or 3 other utilities are going through the same thing right now. I think San Francisco may be one of them. But for example, anyway, those are the, Noemi, is that true that you are thinking about a new CMMS system or replacing one? No? No. Okay,
Really?
then I got that wrong. But
We
there are
in
at
the
least a
process.
couple.
Yeah, we are in
Yeah.
the process of implementing Cello. We already selected though.
Okay.
Yeah, and MCES is just starting to, we're hiring somebody to help us to look at every possibility that we're going to need to select a CMMS.
Yeah. So anyway, these are just thoughts, and any comment in the meeting today will be welcome. So I've got my notepad here to take notes. And if you have, the staircase effect, which is, as you're leaving a lively party when you couldn't think of something to say, all of a sudden when you're going down the stairs, you think of all the witty things that you should have said. If you get one of those moments, please send me an email so that we can, take your input in terms of what would be exciting for next year.
So for me, I do like the utilization of the assessments as part of the work for next year, Cello, just
Okay.
because it may, really open up some doors to,
Okay.
shape the discussion around certain gaps. The other things that I always find fascinating, I think I would, like somebody like, like the kind of minds we have here, I think could be helpful with.